Hello everybody, Marc Elliott de Lama here from Fluent Finance Abroad again. Today I want to talk about one of the biggest mistakes international and foreign buyers make when purchasing property in Spain. The mistake isn't necessarily choosing the wrong property. The mistake is becoming emotionally attached to a property before understanding whether the purchase is financially achievable and viable for their circumstances. Most buyers start by browsing property portals, looking at beautiful homes on the Costa del Sol and the rest of Spain, and imagining the lifestyle that comes with that. Before long, they picture themselves living in that space and enjoying the property with their friends and family. The problem with doing things like this is that emotion often arrives before the financial planning aspect, and that's what we're here to talk about. I'll give you a real example. We were recently contacted by an Irish couple who had already found their dream property and committed themselves emotionally and financially to the purchase. But they had started to worry that the mortgage side of the process was not going as well as they hoped. Unfortunately, they engaged their conveyancing lawyer to look after the money side of the deal. But after the client and I did a quick analysis, it did seem that the mortgage application hadn't been structured in the best way from the outset. By the time we were contacted, unfortunately, the deadlines were fast approaching. The vendor wanted to know answers and everybody involved were under extreme pressure. And at that late stage, we were unable to assist as all the lenders had been contacted and the relationships had been burnt. And we really didn't have time to intervene. The potential buyers seemed really, really stressed out and under pressure. And then it kind of sort of came to light that the deal wasn't going to go through. The reality is that most of that stress could have been avoided had the financing been assessed before the property search became serious. In our opinion, the correct approach is actually quite simple. First of all, you must understand your financing first. Understand your affordability. Obtain a formal mortgage agreement in principle from a recognized Spanish lender. And then at that point, go for it. Then start your property search. We always say, use your brain first and then your heart second. It is the logical step. And remember, you've got to shop for the finance before you shop for your property. Okay, another common mistake. Why mortgage preparation should come before property viewing. Property viewing, in our opinion, creates emotion. Mortgage preparation creates certainty. By the time many buyers reach a mortgage broker or a lender directly, they have already fallen in love with that particular property. The challenge is that the lender's underwriter has no emotional attachment to that property whatsoever, and will therefore work to their normal timescales, not the potential purchasers. This bit is important. The mortgage underwriter's responsibility is always to assess affordability, assess the documentation, do a risk analysis, and make sure the application is compliant for the regulator. One situation that stands out to us involved a UK business owner and his wife. They spent months touring properties with their preferred agent, and finally they found the one and made an acceptable offer. By the time the client came to us for the initial mortgage viability assessment, it became pretty apparent fairly quickly that the demonstrable income to qualify for the loan required would not be viable under current Spanish mortgage rules. The buyer were emotionally committed, but they were not financially ready to move ahead for this particular deal, meaning that they had to go back to the drawing board, and I even believe that they completely gave up on their dream of owning Spanish property because their new realistic budget fell well short of what they really, really fell in love with. A really important point is lenders don't work to emotional timescales. They work to underwriting and regulatory timescales and strict affordability criteria. They are not measured on how quickly they approve a mortgage. They are measured on whether they are making the right lending decision. In our opinion, in our experience, preparation creates confidence. Confidence creates better purchasing decisions. Critical situation number 3, how buyers lose reservation deposits in Spain. Now we need to talk about reservation deposits. Many buyers assume that if the financing doesn't work out, they'll automatically receive their reservation deposit back. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. The Spanish system is different. One example we see fairly regularly involves bank valuations. Now, let's imagine a buyer agrees to purchase a property of €500,000 and expects to borrow the maximum for non-residents, which sits at 70 to 75% loan to value. Everything looks amazing. The banker said it's been approved, and then they send out the lender's valuation. The bank's valuer comes back and they value it at 450,000. That can happen. The bank then bases the mortgage on the valuation and not what you're paying for it. Suddenly, there's a problem. We have a funding gap. It could be perhaps €20,000. It could even be as much as €50,000. As you can imagine, this isn't what was expected. Everything was supposed to go fine. Now, the problem is if those additional funds aren't available, the transaction will most likely fail. In my professional opinion, knowing realistic loan-to-value limits as a non-resident mortgage applicant can make the difference between having a successful purchase go through and for having the purchase fall down and failing. Never assume that the finances will work. You got to know that financing is going to work before committing financially. What is a formal mortgage agreement in principle here in Spain? The biggest mistakes I see international buyers make is falling in love with a property before they know whether a lender is actually willing to lend to them. That's why I always recommend obtaining a formal mortgage agreement in principle before beginning a serious property search. Many buyers think all agreement in principles are the same. I'm here to tell you that they are not. A basic agreement in principle is often based on limited information. In Spain, these are called a simulación, a basic simulation only, and these can be obtained from any bank walking into any branch. But a formal agreement in principle goes much further than that. A formal mortgage agreement in principle involves you sending to banks' underwriting departments income, assets, liabilities, affordability, and supporting documentation. This is all sent to the lender underwriting departments and reviewed in great detail, giving a much clearer picture of your borrowing capacity. The lender will give back a full risk-approved mortgage terms and conditions subject to the proposed buyer finding the right property within a 2 and 3 month period. When buyers ask me why a formal agreement in principle matters, I often think back to transactions where people found the perfect property first and only afterwards started investigating the mortgage. In almost every case, the stress comes from the uncertainty, and a formal agreement in principle eliminates that. So the message should be, a formal agreement in principle removes much of the uncertainty before you start your property search. Think of it as a financial reality check before entering the Spanish property market. Before you engage with your agent or before you fall in love with a property, make sure a lender is likely to fall in love with your mortgage application as well. Why estate agents, lawyers, and mortgage brokers have different roles. One of the biggest misconceptions I see from international buyers is that they assume that one professional is looking after every aspect of the property transaction. In our opinion, the estate agent helps you find the right property. That's obvious. The Spanish conveyancing lawyer protects your legal interests and ensures that all taxes and everything else get paid. Now, the Spanish mortgage broker determines whether the transaction is financially achievable and structures the financing correctly and offers guidance as to realistic timelines. One of the common themes we see when transactions become difficult is that everyone assumes somebody else has already checked the finances. The estate agent assumes the buyer has spoken to the broker or has the cash available to complete. After all, why on earth would you make a formal mortgage offer without having done the maths? Now, the lawyer assumes financing has already been assessed, and the buyer assumes somebody else is looking after it. Now, we know, unfortunately, assumptions don't complete property purchases. In our opinion, the best transactions occur when everyone works together and each professional focuses on what they do best. There is a huge difference between being interested in buying property in Spain and actually being ready to do so. Interested buyers browse property portals, watch videos, speak to estate agents, and attend viewings. Spanish mortgage-ready buyers know how much deposit they have available, understand how much they can borrow, and often already have a mortgage agreement in principle. We've seen countless situations where a buyer has found the perfect property and only afterwards has started organising their mortgage. We honestly feel that this is the wrong way to do things. The application itself wasn't impossible, but it required additional underwriting. It needed more scrutiny because of the client's circumstances. And being a non-resident, it's not going to be straightforward all of the time. While the lender was out carrying out its assessment, the vendor became impatient and accepted another offer from a cash buyer. The mortgage was not declined. The buyer simply wasn't ready when the opportunity appeared. In our view, the buyers who succeed most consistently are not necessarily the wealthiest buyers. They're the best prepared buyers. From what we see, one buyer is dreaming and the other buyer is preparing, and we can help you prepare. The message is, become mortgage ready before you become emotionally attached to a property. And please, use your brain first and your heart second. And as always, shop for your finance before you start shopping for your property. Thank you.